Hey everybody, welcome to the fourth and final video in the series on our introductory unit to zoology. Sorry, I had to get a sip of coffee there. Today we're going to be talking about the major animal phyla that we will be studying in zoology class. So we talked about how there are 36 animal phyla in the previous lesson. We are only going to be focusing our time on 5 of those 36. Nowhere near enough time to talk about all 36. So we're going to narrow down to those 5, and those are pretty popular, pretty well-known animals that are in those phyla. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, here we go. We're going to start with our last video in the series, and today we're going to talk about the major animal phyla that we will study. In the previous video, we talked about how there were 36 different animal phyla, and there's no way we can discuss all of them. So we're going to go over the 5 that we will discuss in this semester. All right, so they are phylum Annelida, Mollusca, echinodermata, arthropoda, and then finally phylum Chordata. So let's take a look at these different animal phyla. First is phylum Annelida. Okay, phylum Annelida is the group of segmented worms. Now there are 3 classes of segmented worms that we'll talk about in phylum Annelida. We'll get into their class names later, but we have these, probably the one that everyone is most familiar with. We have these guys right here. These are the earthworms. Again, if you've ever gone fishing as a little kid, you've probably used earthworms for bait, or in the summer, if you've ever walked down the sidewalk after a rainstorm, you probably saw lots of earthworms. The other group are these guys right here. They're called the polychaetes, and they are a group of marine worms. They live in the ocean, and you can see they have very small little appendages there that are attached to each segment. And then down here, everybody's favorite segmented worm, we have the leeches. And you'll find there are lots and lots of different kinds of leeches out there. These that are pictured here are referred to as medicinal leeches because in times gone by, they still use today in some instances, but they were used heavily in medical practice, believe it or not. And so that's how they have gotten the name the medicinal leech. Next we have phylum echinodermata, means spiny skinned. The echinoderms are what many people would call the sea star. Most people call them starfish, but that is a incorrect use of the term. They are not fish. They are echinoderms, and we would refer to them as sea stars. And there are lots of different kinds. Here you have most of the starfish that we see have these 5 arms. There are other kinds here. With this one clearly has more than 5 arms. You got a brittle star down here, which has a very small central portion. Right next to the brittle star is this guy. This is a spiny sea urchin, and they are all grouped in phylum echinodermata. And then if you've ever been to the beach, you probably found some of these, the good old sand dollar. And here's one that's alive, and here's one that's not so alive. Okay, those are the echinoderms, and again, it means spiny skinned. Next, we have probably one of my favorite. This is phylum Molusca. These are the mollusks, And you can see there are lots of different kinds. We got the snail and the slug are in phylum Mollusca. The clams and oysters, this is a giant clam, and this, of course, is the good old-fashioned oyster. If you've ever had oysters on the half shell, you're familiar with the bivalves, which is their class, the clams and oysters. And over here is a nautilus. This is a free-swimming shelled mollusk. And the giant, well, this isn't the giant. I believe that's a Humboldt squid. And you can see there, it's pretty big. There's the diver with that squid. And a very close relative, and probably hands down one of my favorite animals, is the octopus. This guy down here. And the octopus is an incredible animal. We'll talk a lot about them and how smart they are. Their amazing camouflage ability, their ability to get in and out of just about anywhere, and they're really, really neat creatures. Those are the mollusks. Next, we have the largest phylum of living things, and those are the arthropods. The arthropods are any animal that has an exoskeleton. So we have everything from crabs and lobsters and crayfish. So here's one of the big, I can't remember where they are, but one of the big land or terrestrial crabs. This is a mantis shrimp. They're pretty amazing. Those are arthropods. The spiders. This is the face of a jumping spider. Also closely related to spiders are the ticks and mites. And then, of course, the absolute hands down largest group are the insects. So here's a beetle, and then everybody's favorite, the cicada, and the good old monarch butterfly down here. Just to give you an idea of the sheer number, this is a beetle. There are over 350,000 different species of beetles that have been discovered and classified. 350,000 different species of beetles. That is the largest class of any, hands down, the largest class of any group of animals on the face of the planet. So if you find an insect and you're not sure what it is, just guess that it's a kind of beetle, because odds are in your favor that that's what it would be. So we will spend a lot of time talking about the arthropods simply because there are so many of them. And then finally, the last, and the one that most of us are familiar with, the last phylum would be phylum Chordata. And this is where we would be classified as human beings. So any of the reptiles, so we got a couple reptile representatives here. We got the good old chameleon. Here's a ball python. I put the ball python in there because I used to have a ball python. Number one, when I was allowed to have a pet in class, I had a ball python named Spot in class. And Spot recently died about 2 years ago, and I had him for over 20 years. He was a good snake. So reptiles are in phylum Chordata. And remember, in phylum Chordata, they have to have a dorsal nerve cord. So reptiles and your snakes and your lizards, your crocodilians, all your alligators and crocodiles and turtles, of course, all have a dorsal nerve cord. So they're in phylum Chordata. Fish, whether they're the bony fish or the cartilaginous fish, still have a dorsal nerve cord. So cartilaginous fish are all the sharks and rays, and then your bony fish, everything from the catfish and carp all the way up to your game fish, your bass, and all your saltwater species, marlin and tarpon and grouper, so on and so forth, all in phylum Chordata. Birds, of course, we had to put the old bald eagle, because I'm a bald guy. And it's our nation's bird, so you got to have the bald eagle. And then the mammals. So here we are. Here's a wolf. We're the wolves, so got to put the wolf. This big old rhino. That's a chordate. And naturally, being the hunter of deer. I had to put a big old buck in there. And hopefully someday I'll see a buck this big and I'll put an arrow about right there. And I'll talk him into taking a truck ride. So that is the group of chordates. And that's going to be all of the phylum that we are going to discuss in this semester. So let's go over the classes in each of the phyla. So in phylum Annelida, the annelids, we have 3 classes: polychaetes, those are the marine worms I mentioned earlier; oligochaetes, those are your earthworms; and Herodenia, those are the leeches. And again, those are the 3 classes that we will discuss. In class Arthropoda, we have subphylum Chelicerata, we have subphylum Crustacea, and subphylum Uniramia. The chelicerates are going to be your spiders and ticks. Crustaceans are your lobsters and crabs. And Uniramia, that's where all your insects are going to be. Next would be phylum Molusca. These are the class of clams and oysters, which would be class Bivalvia. Gastropoda, class Gastropoda, are the slugs and snails. And my favorite of the mollusks, class Cephalopoda, are the squids and the octopi. Echinodermata, phylum Echinodermata, the classes are Stelloroidea, Echinoidea, Holothuroidea, and Crinoidea. And phylum Chordata, we're going to have subphylum Urochordata, Cephalochordata, and subphylum Vertebrata. Okay, so those are the groups that we will study. Now, you may be thinking, well, what's a subphylum? Well, subphylum is going to be a group smaller than phylum but larger than class. And that's how that is broken down. So I know we talked about the different levels, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, but there are over 1 million organisms that have been classified, and they have found that it helps if they have some sub or super categories. So you can have a subphylum or you can have a super order. So it will be larger than order but smaller than class. And that's how that's broken up. So of the subphylum, Urochordata, Cephalochordata, and Vertebrata, we won't spend a whole lot of time with these guys. We'll jump down and we'll cover the different classes that are all going to be in Vertebrata. And the classes in Vertebrata that we will talk about will be the 3 classes of fish: Agnatha, which are your very old species of fish, the jawless fish; Chondriichthyes, those are your sharks, your cartilaginous skeletons made of cartilage; and Osteichthyes, your bony fish. And then the other classes will be class Amphibia, your amphibians. These are pretty self-explanatory. Class Reptilia, the reptiles; class Aves, the birds; and class Mammalia, the mammals. All right, that is the end of this video unit. So let's go ahead and log on out of here. All right, that's it for major animal phyla. At this point, just as always, log on out of YouTube, head on over to Schoology, find your exit slip for this lesson 4 video assignment, and answer your questions. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you later.